Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this latest teaching session in the course on technology and the future of medicine. Today we're going to talk about of clout and cliffs, snatching us back from the brink of disaster. Will technology save humanity or sink it? And I guess from that title you can't tell exactly what we're going to talk about, but it's a mixture of things, and I think you'll probably enjoy at least some of the things. So the first is the idea of predicting the future. Now, if you look at the bottom part of this slide, this was a very, very prominent guy writing in 1995 about his prediction that the internet would end the next year. It would all go black. It would die. And this was the guy who discovered, Ethernet and a lot of, he was a very prominent technology person. Wrote this predicting the internet's catastrophic collapse and ghost sites galore in 1996. Almost all the many predictions now being made about 1996 hinge on the internet's continuing exponential growth. But I predict the internet, which only just recently got this section here in InfoWorld, will soon go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 catastrophically collapse. Here's why. And he goes on to tell all the reasons. So that obviously didn't happen. So I am also unable to predict the future of clout. I don't know if you guys know about clout, but clout is a way, K-L-O-U-T, to measure your impact in social media and on the internet generally. And at a certain point in the course, we got quite interested in this, and Ross Lockwood and I both joined Klout, and we were we watched as Ross, kind of a prominent young person your own age, when he first signed on, he had a score of 25, and in a few days it was up to the 50s and so on. So he had sort of a meteoric rise as the system became aware of what he was doing. Now, you can mess with clout. You can artificially increase your score. If you claim that you're getting married when you really aren't, that your score will go way up, but it will also go back down, and it may go way down when people realize what a darn liar you are, who would lie about something like that. And also, if you contact a lot of people who already have a high clout, and if they react back to you, then that will also raise your clout. But if they realize you're only doing that to get a higher clout, then you'll make enemies in the tech world. So all these ways of gaming the system have consequences. Originally, Justin Bieber had the highest clout, and people thought this was not correct, that this was not the way the world should be. So now Barack Obama has the highest clout, and Justin Bieber's a little lower. So they sort of readjusted things. So being a world leader counted for something, and so on. Being involved in a number of different networks and social media sites helps. Quality trumps quantity. Many high clout people are not consistently active on sites. In other words, are highly respected people, but they don't necessarily spend a lot of time every day in social media. They may be silent for long periods. It's probably best not to be terribly preoccupied with your clout score, but in the background, if you kind of come up with a theory, nobody really knows. It's a proprietary formula. Nobody knows exactly how clout determines what your score is. But just knowing about it in the background may allow you to make more appropriate choices about your behavior online. Now, you may wonder, what's the thing that raised my clout score the most? And that's very, very surprising. If you think of all the things that I've done and what might have been really good for my clout, this picture up on the upper right is a picture of a fluorescent microscope, and I use that every day. Actually, Raja also uses that. And it's like a boring part of our regular life, but putting that picture up, I got more people liking it than had ever liked any of my pictures before. And it had a substantial impact on Klout. And I think maybe it was because my friends are very heterogeneous, all different kinds of friends, but somehow they all liked that picture. So at a certain time, Joel Crichton, who's a singer-songwriter in Edmonton, about your age, 26 now, I guess, and I had the same Klout, and he was visiting this course, listening to the lectures in the course, and it was kind of interesting to, ideally, you then determine how to judge whether you're achieving the real goals you set for yourself in life and online, and you're not spending time worrying about exactly how the Klout algorithm works. Because nobody knows. It's like the formula for lots of other proprietary things. Nobody really knows what the formula is. And a high Klout score then becomes a natural side effect of behavior you want to be engaging in anyway. So, all right. Now, what about Joel Crichton? Now, Joel Crichton was doing an album called Pins on a Map when he took this course. And I helped to support the album financially, and the deal was he was going to write a song about the course. And he did write a song about the course. And with any luck, we're going to show you that song now. Let's see what happens if I click this and that. Okay. Here it comes, coming at you very soon.
I've got a half-life ticking and EKG readings that are beating the shore to dust. I've got a smartphone crystal ball, touch screen and all, but the screen won't touch. And it's this analog melody stuck in my head, and it's driving me insane, cause I got this chronic condition that'll suffer no remission, and I'm feeling that I ain't got time. Ooh yeah, yeah. Show me an android heart, an AI mind, and a spirit in the machine. Show me an optimistic and futuristic prognosis and what it means. Help me to see the future between the sutures. Will it be good or bad, or will we recognize a thing when we all pull the pin? Will it resemble what we had? It's a singularity. Yeah, it's a singularity. Beyond event horizon, will we wisen up or find a kind of glory? What's the story of the singularity?
What you hear is not a test, it's a singularity. A risk thing, isn't it? To envision it, or does the future look rather dissonant? Robots now, but what about later? Will it be like Terminator? Or are we headed for utopia? Well, follow me and I'll show ya.
Voices from every field across the world are coming to ya. Attend the class or watch from home, it's coming to ya. Kim Solez has the contacts and he's bringing them to ya. It's coming to ya, the future's coming to ya. So come to the future.
Technology and the future of medicine. Lab MP 590. So just to give credit where credit's due there, Angus Findlay, the senior videographer, created that music video. And the friendship between Joel and me started because a long part of my career as a pathologist, I studied something called acute tubular necrosis, Necrosis. And I never heard anybody outside of medicine use that term before. And then Joel did a fringe show, a musical, about what it's like to be 25, all the conflicts between, living at home and being independent and so on, all the things that young people today face at the age of 25. And one of his songs had the phrase imaginational necrosis. And I was so taken that he used my special word that we started up a friendship, and that's sort of how that began. Okay, so that's sort of a fun video, and now I'm going to show you another video of something that happened to me in December 2004, because you may wonder, how is it that I came to create and develop this course? I mean, why? It just seems like a rather random act, right? I'm a kidney pathologist. How did I end up doing this? And so this thing that happened to me in December 2004 explains a little bit of my sort of feeling of a bond with technology, because in this event, a cell phone saved my life, and it was kind of dramatic back then. Like right now, if you had some difficulty today, if you fell down a manhole or something, and got stuck or trapped, you'd likely have your cell phone with you and you'd call for help and stuff. That's sort of standard now. But in 2004, it really wasn't. So it was a big deal that, without the cell phone, I would have died, and with it, I, survived, and it was a really, emotional thing.
Dr. Kim Solez is a big Leonard Cohen fan. He came all the way from Edmonton just to go to this 4-day tribute to Cohen on stage at the LSPU Hall in downtown St. John's. Of course, there's more to the city than just music. Signal Hill, for example. Some well-meaning local resident even showed Dr. Solez and his wife Elaine how to get to the trail.
She was recommending that for us. I guess she didn't realize there'd been a bit of snow and ice and a really hard-packed snow.
The Solezes set out from Cabot Tower around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, figuring they'd breeze through the trail. No such thing. By the time they reached this part, they were crawling on their bellies.
You could see the other bridges, but no path and just hard-packed snow. I was really scared because I felt so close to falling off the edge, and I honestly felt that any attempt for me to get to that next bridge was going to really tumble me into the drink there, and no one would ever see me again. It was a very steep drop.
Around 4:30, stuck on the ice with night falling fast, Dr. Solez called 911 on his cell phone, and a rescue crew set out to bring them back.
It was really frightening. I've been to a lot of parts of the world that are dangerous on record, where everybody recommends you not go there. But the real danger, this was tangible danger you can feel, not just the theory, not just the, an advisory you read on the net. This was real danger.
How do you feel? Cold?
Yeah. Dr. Solez and his wife got a ride back to their hotel, frozen, with bruised knees and a bit shaken up, but otherwise okay, and with enough time to freshen up and make the night's show. Atsritsori, CBC News, St. John's.
So, it does cause one to ponder that question of whether technology is going to save us or whether it will be the end of us. You can argue it either way. So this is what the cell phone I was carrying then looked like. In the old days, you could open up a cell phone and change its batteries. Some of you may have primitive cell phones. You can do that today, but most of them you can't. So I was kind of bored on that day. We'd gone for this Leonard Cohen event, and I was in St. John's, and there was nothing else to do until the evening. You look out the window, and you see Signal Hill, and it's sort of beckoning, you know. And but one of the other things I was doing as a technologically, focused guy, I was charging up these cell phone batteries. So I had 2 fully charged cell phone batteries when this thing began, and that's what the battery looks like over there. And so I'll tell you the story, and you can sort of to come to your own conclusions. So since 2002, I've run Leonard Cohen tribute events. You probably know Leonard Cohen is Canada's premier or best-known poet, singer, songwriter. So since 2002, I've been running events for Leonard Cohen's birthday. And there's a woman in St. John's who also does Leonard Cohen events, Vicki Hines. So she invited me to come to her event, which is on multiple days between Christmas and New Year's. You know, it's a mainly fishing community. You can't fish at that time of the year, so people literally have nothing to do. So you can pack this venue night after night after night with all these bored fishermen who can't fish in the winter, and they come and listen to Leonard Cohen tunes. So they asked us to come as sort of their honored guests, and with seats right in the middle of the auditorium and stuff, for the December 29th performance at 8 p.m. But we didn't have anything to do before then, so we decided, well, I'd been to Signal Hill before in the summer, and the walk down is just transcendently beautiful. And I thought, well, why not do that? So it beckoned to us out of the window. These are actual pictures from that visit. And this is the welcome to Signal Hill. So after lunch, we took the cab up to that Cabot Tower, the building on the top, that has a gift shop. And there's an important difference, technological difference, between my wife's coat and mine. My coat was a very, very modern coat with an extremely frictionless surface. It's like the smoothest thing you could possibly imagine. My wife had a normal coat, you know, that like has some abrasive friction. And so that's why I kept slipping toward the edge of the cliff, and she was just fine later on in the story. So the clerk at the gift shop, whose name I don't know, and I have no idea what the ultimate consequence of this was for her, but she said she was having a bad day. That's the first thing that she told us. And then we said, well, how should we get down from here? So she told us to take the North Head Trail, and it would only take us 40 minutes. It was right on the edge of the sea, and the beautiful views on the way down, and it would be lovely. And what she had told us in the summertime is absolutely true, but in the wintertime, it's lethal. You can't go there, particularly after the snow. But the snow was late in 2004, so it's like the fall lasted until just about the day that we arrived, and then there was snow. So we did notice that there were no footprints. It's not like others had gone this path before. We were going down this beautiful path with beautiful views of the sea and everything, but there was no footprints there. It was a beautiful cliff edge walk, but the going became more and more difficult, and this very strong wind and sea spray. So even though the sea was a long way down, the waves hit with such force, and there was so much wind that there was a lot of water coming up, and it shorted out the circuit board in the cell phone. So finally, we could not go forward or back, but we're crawling on our bellies, and I kept slipping toward the edge, and we stopped shivering. Now, you know that when you're cold and you shiver, you're okay, because shivering's the normal reaction. And you should only worry when you stop shivering, because that's when, you know, your temperature can plummet and you may die soon and all that stuff. So we stopped shivering, and finally I grabbed hold of the wooden post on the 17th bridge and called 911. Now the way that I did that is I kept warming the cell phone in one hand and warming the battery in the other hand, switching a battery for long enough so that the thing would actually work, and then it would show low battery and not function again, and I put in the other fully charged battery. Anyway, doing that, we contacted 911. It was a very slow news day. The fire hall people in St. John's didn't have any other, things to respond to. There's nothing else going on. The news services had no other stories to cover. So this turned out to be a really big deal. So it was interesting. They said, "We will rescue you, sir." And particularly because I knew the number of the bridge, so wow, this guy knows the bridge number. So, there were like 27 bridges, something like that on this route, and I knew we were on 17. So about 40 minutes later, we saw the lights of the rescuers, and the rescue team, maybe 10 people, but then they pick one, and he's the only guy who really puts himself at risk. So he was connected by ropes to the other team up there, but he came down where we were with 3 extra ropes. Now you may wonder why 3. So it was one for my wife, and one for me, and one for the camera. So the camera had its own little rope, and then he told us to be very careful and to sort of, move like he was moving. We went up to the next level, and then we all went up to the basically sort of parking lot outside Cabot Tower where the media had assembled, and the police and all the news media were there, and my lips were frozen and stuff, but we got back to the hotel, spent about 5 minutes freshening up, and then we went in the car, and we got to the concert right on time. And Leonard Cohen had heard about this, so he sent me a message, "I'm glad you're back on terra firma." So anyway, it was a wonderful concert, and we were much more interesting guests than we would have been if we hadn't had this near-death experience, but it was all, sort of confined in a very time, efficient way that it didn't interfere with the concert. So a cell phone saved my life in 2004. That was unusual back then. Your cell phones, the devices you're carrying, are so integrated with your lives now that it's impossible to think that you would be stuck or in some difficulty somewhere without any of your devices there. So in a sense, cell phones today save lives every day, every hour. We don't really think about it. It's just a part of what we have with us. If the default position for human beings is to have a cell phone, is it correct to say that we're saved by cell phones or by technology regularly, or is that the wrong way to think about it? We reset life's expectations to where we're always able to reach others when we need them. That just becomes just normal life. And when technology is successful, it seems to disappear into the background. We'll talk more about that in later lectures, but for instance, the term artificial intelligence really only applies in any field when they start to get into AI. Once the AI is actually successful, then they don't call it AI anymore. It's the new, respirometer, the new dialysis machine, whatever. Once they successfully integrate AI, just makes the thing itself better, and you stop calling it AI. So there's much more artificial intelligence all around you than you may realize. Is it possible that we're safer because of technology and just don't realize it? Safety accompanies the ideas that we've been presenting of abundance and post-scarcity. You can already show that in today's society, for the guys in the room, 100 years ago, there was about a 50 to 60% chance that your life would end by you being killed by some other man. That just was, that was the way life was. And now the chances of that are actually rather low. They're not zero, but so society has really changed in a way that's much, much safer. And whether that's due to technology or just to general changes in society is maybe hard to say. Basically that's it. My goodness, it's 2:27 and I'm done, but on the other hand, there'll probably be other lectures where you think, when is this guy going to finish? So the fact that I ran short today is probably okay. So that's the end of this presentation. Any questions about it or about the course and how the course is going and stuff? Are we meeting your expectations? Or so the microphone's there, and whoever feels most inclined to speak should probably take it and start speaking. So who would that be? Yeah. Why don't you start at that end? They look braver to me. I don't know. Yeah. So take it down there, Paul. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Yeah, do you think there's some chance that become over-dependent on technology? Because say you didn't have your phone, and then...
Yeah, no, that's right. So technology also helps us if we fake it. Like as most women know, even if you don't have a phone, if you're walking through a dark place and hold your hand up to your ear, whoever's watching you will think you're in contact with the outside world and sort of invulnerable, right? Because you're now a part of the matrix. They can't possibly, approach you because you. So I think one of the interesting things, how did I choose the tech skeptics that you'll be hearing from in the course? You're hearing from both of them next week. They're people that often don't have cell phones on them and go long periods without accessing the internet or using cell phones. So there still are people like that. So I think we in some sense of the word we are maybe too dependent upon technology, but there's a good balance there. Heterogeneity there. Because human beings are not an inbred species, we have a considerable variation in the way that we do things. It's interesting that the Unabomber, who was quite an educated person, he's still alive, but he basically rejected technology, went into the woods, and then began sending bombs to people. And in return for stopping sending the bombs, he requested this Unabomber manifesto be published. And of course, one never likes to publish something under threat, but it's quite an interesting document, and it deals with some of these same issues of whether we are becoming overly dependent upon these things.
Yeah, because for myself, I know I can't get to somewhere new without my phone navigation. So as long as the technology is there, everything's fine.
Yes.
But if there was some scenario where the technology is wiped out, either by lack of energy maybe, then I think that would be a catastrophe.
Yeah. Well, I think like many people sleep with their phone in their pocket. It may be, you know, on vibrate. It may have regular ring. If it's on regular ring and you sleep with it, then you learn to sort of integrate it with your dreams and stuff, right? And it just is really a part of you. Is that bad to do? I don't know. I think there is no, you know, morality about this. It's your life, you know. You can conduct it how you want. Want to leave the phone downstairs so that when you're sleeping, you're completely out of contact with the outside world? If you want to always have the phone on you so that you always feel sort of connected even in your dreams and even when you're sleeping, you know, either of those I think can be justified. And I suppose part of what we're trying to do in this course is to provide more organized thinking about this. I mean, these are really questions, generic questions that everybody in our society deals with every day, you know. And also, like having your battery go dead, of course, it never needs to go dead. There are 1,000 different ways to always have a way to recharge your phone no matter where you are. But it may be socially very, very convenient to have your phone go dead or pretend that it goes dead, because it's the greatest, you know, excuse for not showing up for things or not, you know, returning email or calls or whatever. So everybody comes up with sort of their own formula of how to make this work for them. And I don't think there's any right or wrong. Anybody, you know, if you're in a large gathering and somebody is saying, "Oh, my phone died," if you rushed up to that person and said, no, I have a battery right here, it'll charge your phone instantly. For some people, that would be the worst thing you could possibly do, because the fact that their phone died then is sort of integrated into their whole plan for the day, you know. So, yeah.
Do you think there's anything dangerous about more technology, though? Because, like, in today's day, people can find each other 24/7, for example, with new phones.
Yeah, well, I think the Snowden revelations have kind of answered that. I mean, in the past, you could say, well, theoretically, if you're carrying a cell phone, people can figure out not where you are, or, you know, people can access your texts and
because like recently there was a scandal, like you saw in the news. I don't know. Yeah. So now I think it's absolutely clear that we're losing privacy in some sense. I mean, you may not care if, you know, the NSA accesses your life. You may consider that you're not very interesting to them, and maybe the fact that you're a relatively boring target, not, you know, doing anything that they would be particularly interested in, means that the fact that they can access anything that you send is maybe not, you know, concerning to you. But on the other hand, it's very interesting, you know, Snowden identified some apps now that cannot be broken, or at least he thinks can't, and that seem still safe. If you want to have a completely confidential communication, you can still do that. So yeah, there certainly are dangers. But I mean, if you think the way technology is going, the idea of smart dust that you couldn't see, that's capable of, you know, visualizing the room or, you know, the place where you are, eventually we're going to all be surveilled, presumably. You know, there'll be somebody watching, and it's a matter of how society manages that. It may not even be a
person, right? I mean, if everybody's being surveilled, that's too much data for, human beings to actually be watching all that.
But why is there a need for that much surveillance? Is there something we're scared of, though, in a sense? Like, if we're nonstop surveilling everyone, like, who's in control of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think these are, decisions we can make, right? We can make it politically unpopular so that governments don't do that, so people don't plan to do it, so people prefer visiting places where that's not the circumstance, because now you can choose to visit places where everybody's surveilled and places where they aren't. So I think that may become an important determinant, like when you take, a vacation, where you go. If you'd like to have it be truly private and something that only you know about. There are at the moment South Sea Islands and stuff where you can certainly do that. So I think that's the other idea of being able to shape the future, to be able to, in this course, kind of come up with your own philosophy of which path we should take here. Do we think that a situation where everybody's being surveilled, where there's always a kind of backup video copy of whatever you're doing, will this, dissuade bad guys from doing bad things? Will it create a more moral society? Will it make us completely boring where nobody does anything interesting anymore? It's really hard to predict the outcome, but people are. David Brin wrote a book, The Transparent Society. He's a science fiction author who also writes nonfiction, and it's a very interesting book. It's, I think, about 10 years old now, and it kind of predicts a society where privacy is lost, just because that seems to be the way policy is currently heading. It isn't the way it has to happen. It's just one option, I guess. Other thoughts? Yeah?
I'd just like to add something. It's not that just as, say the government is surveilling everyone, it's also peer-to-peer surveillance. So we're all our lives are more public now.
Yes.
And personally, I think like on the trajectory that we were on now, eventually it's going to reach a point where everything's public. And I think that might not be so much of a bad thing, because if everything's out, then nothing's going to shock everyone. And it's just, everything about everyone. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You would assume that you guys are much more active on Facebook than I am, but actually that isn't true, I think. Like I have 38,000 pictures on Facebook. It's probably way more than you have. I don't know, 1,600 albums. And I was shocked. The ability to count that has been there only for a few weeks. And before, I would have had no idea. But I would have thought from my approximately 1,000 Facebook friends that I'd sort of be in the middle of the spectrum. And to find that I have more albums and more pictures than any of the rest of them is really kind of shocking. But all I can say is it hasn't had any adverse effect that I can think of. And it's probably opened some doors. People become interested based on a particular set of pictures that they see. That includes, of course, pictures of this course that are taken by that camera. So it doesn't mean that every picture that I post is personally taken by me. Some is taken by the software, the Sony Smile Shutter software. So yeah, and the person who has the most pictures and albums on Facebook of all is some lame gamer guy. It looks like there's really nothing interesting about him. He's just constantly taking pictures and posting them, but you know, there's nothing particularly interesting. On the other hand, the only friend of mine on Facebook who has almost as many pictures as I do is a very interesting person. So you know, within that group of 1,000 people, it looks like posting a lot of pictures isn't necessarily, you know, a bad thing. I don't know. I can't answer, and I realize now that I'm biased because I'm at like one end of a spectrum. And most, you know, physicians are not on Facebook at all. They're sort of, they have an unreasoned fear about it. They can't even, you know, describe to you exactly what's wrong with Facebook. They just know it's very, very wrong, and they'll never go there no matter what. And that's sort of their feeling about it. So I'm just thinking, I guess all the physicians teaching in this course are on Facebook, but they're kind of a subset. I think most, you know, physicians that you meet are not, and are sort of generally fearful of social media in general. So the other three of you, what are your thoughts? You want to pass the microphone down? Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a bunch of questions I wrote out. Do you think technology will take away from people's basic skills like map reading or driving with like the Google self-driving cars?
Yeah, so there are a lot of jobs that are based on human skills, like map reading or driving cars, and it's clear that those jobs will be gone at some point, and it's interesting to think what does, you know, what does the human race lose when we lose those jobs? You know, the organization Mensa, MENSA, is people with very high IQs. They can join this organization. And it's interesting, some of them have high status jobs, and you know, you say, okay, well that makes sense, that guy's got a very high IQ and he's doing this. But some drive trucks, and they don't, you know, aspire to anything particularly lofty. They enjoy the thoughts going on in their heads as they drive those trucks. And so it's kind of, you know, a kind of poetic thought somehow to think of, okay, what will happen now when those guys stop driving trucks? We may have assumed that, you know, truck drivers are not creative at all, you know, probably can't do anything else than drive a truck, but then those that have, you know, IQs much higher than any of us in this room obviously could do something else. They just don't want to, you know, they're happy driving the truck, sleeping in that little, you know, compartment above the cab. It all works for them. So you could imagine that life will force them to do something they'll probably be quite good at, like writing poetry and, you know, doing philosophy and things that they always could have done, but there was just never any pressure for them to do it. And now when the self-driving trucks and self-driving cars are there, you know, they'll probably end up doing something else. What about the people driving trucks who really don't have the skills to do anything else? I don't know what's going to happen to them. And yeah, reading maps, there are all sorts of things, like some of the mapping things, like if you all know this, but when you're in a car with a mobile device, And like if you have multiple devices, you can be tracking your progress on the road that you're on at various, resolutions. So at low res, it looks like you're only going a little, and at higher res, you're going faster and so on. And the detail you can get of your trip by like comparing the three, looking at sort of where am I in the world, where am I in this country, where am I in this, state, where am I in this city? It's amazing detail. I think nobody ever knew that was going to be possible. It kind of, potentially enhances a trip. You see all sorts of other things you could go visit. There are many things like that. On the other hand, if you think of some bad guy trying to find you, or somebody that you don't want to know where you are, the fact that Google has such an easy time instantly putting that dot and can share that dot with other people. It's not just you who can follow this dot, but other people can also follow the dot. And so it can be known to a large number of people where you are, how fast you're going, what you stop to do. I don't think there really are right and wrong answers to these questions. I think that but it's worthwhile discussing because a lot of people just sort of fall into this without, they fall into being one of these moving points on a Google map without really thinking about the implications. One of the videos about the self-driving car shows a guy who is legally blind, who has never been able to drive, who can now ride around in this self-driving car. So for people like that, it's wonderful. He is suddenly able to do things that he was never able to do before because the car can sort of be his eyes and ears. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And then I have another question. Do you think social medias are going to play a bigger role in the hiring process, like Twitter for like journalists, for example, or like professionals with like LinkedIn?
What do I think social media what?
Will play a bigger role in hiring processes in the future?
Yeah, I think so. So in the science fiction story Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, there's this idea of woofie, W-E-U-F-I-E, which is this score of how you're doing sort of in your internet presence. And clout is sort of based on that. Now, in certain business courses, your grade in the course depends upon your raising your clout or having a certain clout or something. You can imagine that when you fine-tune this, that there'll be a lot of things, like there'll be jobs that are only open to people who have a certain clout score or a certain, social media, presence or, ability. What about all those weekends of, binge drinking in your youth and, all the pictures of them and so on? Well, probably eventually there'll be some, solution to that where you can sort of move forward from a certain point where you figure that like that was not the real you before a certain date, and the real you started at certain times. So you can wipe out all your history from age 18 and a half or something earlier, and just be your sort of adult self or something. So they're probably right now it's sort of accidental. How many embarrassing pictures there are that you've posted or somebody else has, and whether a future employer might look at one of those pictures and say, okay, she's not for us. this woman is never going to work here, not with a picture like that. On the other hand, one needs freedom to not feel that if you ever are in a sort of bodily configuration that your employer won't like, that you'll lose your job or something. You can't have that sort of feeling. So there will, I think, be sort of checks and balances on this, more fairness in the system than there is right now. But not only will social media play a role in hiring for other jobs, but there'll be more jobs in social media itself. The student in this course who posted her video on YouTube and then got this fantastic job in New York City 3 days later, that was a social media job. So I mean, it kind of makes sense. She was, for that company, the person in charge of social media. So I think social media will loom larger both as a source of employment and also as something that impacts on who we select. Other questions? Yeah, yeah?
My last one, I promise. Do you think technology is hindering face-to-face social interactions? Like students between classes will just stare at their phones instead of like engaging and meeting new students?
Sorry, I didn't get that. You want to say it again about just staring at students?
Do you think technology is hindering face-to-face social interactions? Like instead of like talking to the student beside you, you just stare at your phone for like an hour.
No, it certainly changes social interaction. It depends upon what you're doing on your phone, I guess, whether it decreases the quality of your life, whether would it always be better to talk to the person standing beside you than be interacting with your phone. I think less and less that's probably not the case. I mean, every day you probably become more skilled at finding high quality content on your phone, right? Whereas the person standing beside you may be more or less static. That person is no more interesting than they were a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So the phone is kind of, evolving faster than the person, just like we think that in 2045, the machines will be evolving remarkably quickly, and we will have to join them in order to keep up. Yes?
Has clout changed the way you use social media, or do you just use it as like a reference number? Like, does it actually mean anything to you?
It has not changed things because, surprisingly, when I do something in my medical life that I know is good to do in my medical life, like when I'm running a symposium or something like that, when I'm doing something that is what I'm supposed to be doing, when I publish a paper, when I present at a meeting or something, my clout score usually goes down. And I think it's because a lot of the Facebook friends and LinkedIn friends that I have don't really get what I'm doing in medicine anyway, and they only think I'm cool when I'm doing other things. So I don't let it influence me. It is spectacular sometimes when I have some major success in medicine, and I find that my clout on that day has really plummeted. It's like, oh my God, look at that curve. It's going down and down and down. And then when I reach a point where I have more time for social media stuff, then my clout tends to go up. But it also has to do with who I associate with. Now, Julie Lin Wong was the main medicine reporter for ABC News for a while. She's a very sort of media-connected physician. And it used to be when she visited this course, my clout regularly went up. Like as soon as she got into town, my clout was higher. It stayed higher the whole time she was here and then gradually decreased when she left. It's sort of intriguing. We could never really figure out exactly why that happened. Her clout also goes up a little bit when she comes here, but not as much as mine. So it's an interesting way to look at relationships between professional colleagues also. I have no idea really what the data means. So I'm sort of philosophical about clout, realizing that if I got rid of all my low clout days, I'd be a complete failure in my regular job as a doctor. So it's a good thing that those low clout days exist. And it may be the same for the rest of you. I don't know. I'm not promoting clout. I'm just talking about it as something that I think is probably a trend that eventually there'll be some metric like clout that is more meaningful, that we really will use to make decisions about people somehow in a way that we can't really use clout now when it's getting confused about whether Barack Obama or Justin Bieber should have the higher score. It makes it sound like it's not really ready for prime time yet.
So I always find it kind of interesting watching my 3-year-old nephew navigate an iPad. He's able to do it better than most adults are. So I guess my question is, how do you think, well, iPad's one example, but how do you think with a lot of new technologies coming out is going to affect like developing brain and like children and how they learn and different learning processes?
Yeah, so the digital native, that's a term used for a human being that's always been surrounded by digital things, And the puzzle for me, I mean, I'm sort of multitasking the whole day, like I think many of you are. All the studies of multitasking show that humans can't do it. You can really only do one thing at a time. When you think you're multitasking, you're rapid task switching, and that makes each task less efficient than it would be if you just did the one task. And so you're really being stupid multitasking. But I've been doing it for a long time. Most of the young people that I know are doing it. Now, it turns out that the answer is not that simple. If you look at somebody who knows multiple languages, they can multitask better. Women multitask better than men, I think, because of the whole parenting thing and the fact that, they end up multitasking more, so they're kind of better at it. You can imagine that the child growing up surrounded always by digital devices may be better at the language of those digital devices. When we're talking about spoken languages, okay, that's one thing, but I think there probably is a language of the devices themselves that allows you to use them the most, efficient way. Whereas you switch from task to task, it's more seamless. There's not like a big jarring sort of interruption in the one task when you turn your attention to something else. It's called continuous divided attention. The fact that you're never thinking about just one thing, and I personally believe that we will evolve in a way where that kind of works. It's an efficient way to conduct one's life. I think that there are people for whom it's a reasonably efficient way now. They just don't get worried when they read all these articles that say that multitasking is completely stupid and you shouldn't do it, and human beings' brains are not made for multitasking. There must be a solution there that we haven't come up with, and I think the digital native, the children growing up today who have never known a period where there weren't, smartphones around them and, the internet and texting and so on. Really, when you find somebody talking about, email as the main, technology thing, you realize they're caught in another era, because young people today who start working for me, many of them have never used email much. They have email addresses, but that's just so they can sign up for other things. They really don't start sending, email until they start working for me. So email is too slow and clunky and, old-fashioned. So is that wrong for a child to grow up like that? Are their lives less rich? I don't know. I think you can argue it various ways. What about solitude? We talk about solitude and the idea of having uninterrupted thinking time as if it's something wonderful, but on the other hand, we put prisoners who've done bad things in solitary confinement, so on. So there's sort of mixed messages there. And you can have solitude, any of you can. I mean, you can turn your, devices off. You can, it's the question of whether, who's in charge of your life, whether you are or somebody else is. But even if you are, you may choose to be connected, 24/7. That may suit you. It may suit your interests. And it then becomes important to sort of moderate the input that's coming in so that the input you get is what you want to get. It's not a matter of turning off. It's a matter of, talking to convince the contacts that, yes, I want that kind of information. No, I don't want that, And I think that's more the way it's going, that the healthy online or internet life is not one where you switch off for long periods of time, but where you're getting, the input that you want, where it sort of suits you. It fits what you're trying to do. It's not interrupting. It's not creating expectations of you that you don't want at that time. Like I'm connected to my work all the time, but a lot of my work is stuff that I generated myself. It's projects of my own, design, like this course. How can I be, resentful about the fact that I end up working on this course at all different times of the night and day? No, it's just a part of life. If I had a job where I really didn't like the job, but I needed the job, and somebody else was making me do things that I didn't like to do, then after a certain point in the day, I wouldn't want that. And I'd probably want a period of time where it's not legitimate for them, to ask me to do things. But this whole idea of the separation of work life and personal life doesn't take too long before you realize anyone that you admire, any famous person that you'd like to be like, that you admire, they have no separation between work life and personal life. Absolutely none. They've been integrated completely for a long time. And to separate the two only makes sense if you have a job that you really don't like, that's a kind of just a means to an end, then yeah, you want to sort of wall that off. But the best jobs are those that you can completely integrate with your life, and then having, so that then comes back to the child. Is it bad to have the child exposed to devices all the time? I imagine that there are various ways to argue that. In Japan, I don't think it exists much in our society, but there are young people who basically shut off the outside world, right? They just live in their rooms all the time. They don't want to have a job. They don't want to leave home. They just want access to the internet, and they're in their room and they're perfectly happy. They don't want to interact with other real people in the real world. and this is becoming more and more of a phenomenon in Japanese society. My bias is that that's bad. Can argue it various ways that the computer is more benign than the average human being or something. But I think most ways to argue it, that's probably not a positive thing. But it's not happening here yet. I don't know that it's going to be a feature of our society. And, you know, digital skills can be quickly learned. You take a child who's reared without access to the internet and so on, it's sort of like, you know, a fisherman in Central Africa who's sort of leapfrog all the other technologies. He never had a landline phone, you know, he's never made a phone call on a regular phone, but suddenly he's got a smartphone with a fast connection, and you know, it enhances his life very much, and he's not missing much. It's not because he never used the landline phone that he can't do stuff. There are a lot of experiences we've all had. You can now argue that we didn't really need, you know, the skills of dialing that rotary dial in a landline phone. Yeah, we know that. Other people don't. It's not a useful skill. Probably, you know, there's not going to be this crucial moment in your life where you need to use a rotary dial phone. That's not going to happen. Yeah, so, and it's certainly not related to age. You can find elderly people who are very active on social media. You can still find kind of refusenicks, whatever you want to call it, people who are staying off the internet, you know, who are young people and, you know, going to remain in that mode. So I don't know if there's any right or wrong. So we have 12 minutes left, but I don't mind letting you out early. The sessions next week, we'll go the full 80 minutes. They always have, so anyway, you don't have to worry about that. And yeah, I'm, of course, working very energetically to try to figure out exactly who's going to speak the week after next. I think it will be Osmer Zayan starting on the 23rd, but he doesn't get back from holiday until Monday, so I can't really confirm it until then. Any questions or anything else you want to talk about? Failing that, then I think that's it for today, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Have a great weekend. Thanks.